Today was a total car crash for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. So she went to Rochdale to make a big announcement about transport spending. And the workers behind her lost the will to live.
It's a double whammy of bad news for Labour. Prices are rocketing, and the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves have fallen out over taxes.
Rachel Reeves is back in the spotlight.
Later review, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves joins us from Derby.
But this time, it's not for her usual policy debates. This time, the news feels more like payback. Reports say the Supreme Court has just stripped Rachel of her fortune following her highly criticized inheritance tax reform. Ironically, this is the very law she introduced. But why is the Supreme Court stepping in now? And what does this ruling mean for Rachel and for the future of the inheritance tax law? Join us as we break down this shocking development and what it could mean for Rachel Reeves and the entire country. Why Rachel Reeves was stripped of her fortune. The report that Rachel Reeves has been stripped of her fortune following a supposed court judgment has come as a surprise to many. Though still unconfirmed if true, the reason behind such a harsh decision may not be far-fetched. Rachel has been at the center of a controversial inheritance tax reform, one that has stirred public debate and outrage. Yet, despite all the noise, many people still don't fully understand what the scandal and the tax law are really about. If you're one of them, don't worry. Stick with us as we uncover the shocking claims behind this alleged Supreme Court ruling.
The party opposite said that they would take back control. Well, Mr. Speaker, they lost control.
In October 2024, Chancellor Rachel Reeves stood in Parliament and announced major changes to how inheritance tax would work in the UK. She said these reforms would help raise £2 billion more each year for the government. Her goal, she explained, was to make the tax system fairer and ensure that wealth passed down from one generation to the next was taxed more equally. Reeves said the country needed the extra money to help with public services, especially at a time when the cost of living and government debt were both rising.
The cost of living crisis worsens in the UK. Inflation is at its highest level in more than 40 years.
But even though she presented the reforms as a smart move for the economy, many people didn't see it that way. One of the biggest changes Reeves announced was that, starting in April 2027, pensions left behind after someone dies would be taxed under the inheritance tax rules. Before this change, pensions could be passed on without paying any tax, especially if the person died before the age of 75. For years, people had used this rule to avoid inheritance tax by keeping their money in pension pots. With the new law, those who inherit pensions will now have to pay tax on that money, just like they would on other parts of an estate. Many families had planned to rely on inherited pensions for financial security, and this new rule forced them to rethink how they would manage in the future.
Rachel Reeves announced back in the budget, pensions would now be classed as part of your estate when you die, meaning the average earner who has saved a healthy pot would be liable for the 40% tax rate.
Another part of the reform was about freezing the amount of money someone can pass on tax-free. The basic limit of £325,000 and the extra £175,000 allowed when passing on a home to children or grandchildren will now stay the same until at least April 2030. On the surface, it didn't seem like a big change, but over time, property values tend to rise. This means more estates will go over the tax-free limits and become subject to inheritance tax. Middle-income families, especially those who bought homes years ago that have now gone up in value, will find themselves paying taxes they didn't expect. Many were shocked to know that their estates were now considered wealthy enough to be taxed. But that is not all. The government also decided to change the rules for farms and family businesses. Until now, business and agricultural property could often be passed down with little or no inheritance tax. Starting in April 2026, however, The amount that can be passed down tax-free will be capped at £1 million. Anything above that will be taxed at a rate of 20%. This is lower than the normal inheritance tax rate of 40%, but it still means families will have to pay a lot more than before. Many small business owners and farmers were upset by the change. They worried they would have to sell land or shares.
And businesses across the UK are facing significant challenges as they prepare for a tax hike.
Just to cover the tax bill. Some said they might not be able to keep the business in the family anymore. This new limit caused real concern in rural areas where land values are high and farms are passed down through generations. Farming families said they would be forced to sell parts of their land to pay the tax, even though they were not rich in terms of cash. For many of them, the land is their livelihood, not just property. Small businesses also feared they would have to lay off workers or close down entirely. They said the rules didn't take into account how hard it is to run a family business. People who had spent their whole lives building something to pass on to their children were now being told it would come with a heavy tax bill. Even some Labour members of Parliament were unhappy with the new rules. Those who represented farming communities or areas with many small businesses said the reforms would hurt their voters. They believed the policies went against the values of fairness that the party had promised. One member of Parliament from the North East said that his constituents felt betrayed, especially those who had always supported Labour. They didn't expect a government they trusted to put this kind of pressure on working families. Some members of Parliament pushed for the changes to be delayed or adjusted to protect those that run farms and businesses from being forced to sell. Not only that, more and more people across the country voiced their anger. Middle-income families who had saved carefully and paid taxes all their lives felt they were being punished. They believed that inheritance tax was supposed to target the very rich.
Inheritance tax. Nobody likes it, until now.
Not ordinary people who owned a house and had some savings. The changes also raised worries about the wider economy. Business groups and some economists have said the new inheritance tax rules could make people less willing to start or grow a business. Neil Davey, head of Family Business UK, warned that changes to business property relief and agricultural property relief could put over 200,000 jobs at risk, especially in areas like farming, building, hotels, and transport. James Dyson, the man who started Dyson, said the new rules would hurt business owners, stop people from creating wealth, and slow down the economy. Other small business owners, like Tammy Woodhouse of Millbrook Garden Centre and Douglas Anderson of GAP, said the new tax might force them to spend less on their businesses, or even sell them just to pay the tax. All of this has made people worry that the rules could be bad for family businesses and the economy as a whole. It is also reported that with this law, wealthy people might find ways to move their money to other countries with lower taxes. There was also talk about bringing forward a review of the frozen tax thresholds if property prices kept rising. The Treasury didn't confirm anything, but they said they were listening. Reeves herself said the reforms were meant to make the system fairer and more modern, but she also said she was open to hearing feedback. By early 2025, it was clear that the changes to inheritance tax had become one of the biggest political stories of the year.
Rachel Reeves' first major intervention as Chancellor was to set out a black hole in the public finance.
What started as a plan to raise more money had turned into a national debate about what's fair, who should pay, and how families should be allowed to pass on what they've built. But the inheritance tax changes aren't the only thing Rachel Reeves has done that got people talking. She's also introduced other laws that caused a lot of debate. Let's take a look at some of them. Rachel Reeves' controversial policies. In July 2024, Chancellor Rachel Reeves made a decision that caused a strong reaction across the country. She said the government would stop giving winter fuel payments to about 10 million pensioners who didn't get pension credit or other means-tested benefits. This money had helped elderly people with heating bills during cold months. Reeves said the cut was needed because of a £22 billion gap in the country's budget. But many people opposed it. As the months passed, the pressure on Reeves grew. Many said the change hurt pensioners who were not rich but didn't qualify for other help. Some were just slightly above the limit for benefits, and now they were losing more support. In June 2025, Reeves partly changed her decision. She brought back the winter fuel payments for pensioners with lower incomes. A new means test was introduced to decide who would get the payment, but richer pensioners were still left out. Some people were happy with the change, but others said it came too late. Many pensioners had already gone through a winter without enough help. That same summer, on July 29, 2024, Reeves made another big announcement. She said the government would no longer go forward with a plan to reduce the amount people pay for social care. The original plan, made under the CARE Act 2014, said no one would pay more than £86,000 in their lifetime for personal care. This cap was supposed to protect people who needed long-term care, like those with dementia. Reeves said cancelling the cap would save over £1 billion, but many people were upset. Families had counted on the cap to protect their savings. Without it, people feared they could lose their homes or run out of money while paying for care. Later that year, in the October 2024 budget, Reeves introduced more changes. One of the most talked about was an increase in employer national insurance contributions. From April 2025, employers would have to pay 15%.
We will increase the rates of employers' national insurance by 1.2 percentage points to 15% from April 2025.
Up from 13.8% on salaries over £5,000. Reeves also lowered the starting point for these payments, meaning more jobs would be affected. However, this didn't go down well with many business groups. According to them, this would raise the cost of hiring workers and affect small businesses. But Reeves said the change was needed to raise money for public services. At the same time, Reeves made another change that caused debate. Let's find out what it was. She said private schools would have to start paying value-added tax from January 2025. The new 20% tax would be added to school fees. The goal was to raise money for state schools. Some people supported the idea because it would make the system fairer, while others warned it could lead to problems. In that same budget, Reeves also announced cuts to welfare spending. She said the government would reduce welfare by £5 billion. This included stricter rules for personal independence payments and a freeze on incapacity benefits. The government said the changes would stop misuse and make sure only those truly in need got support. Labour Member of Parliament and Charities said the cuts would affect disabled people and those already struggling. The freeze on benefits came while prices were still high and people felt like they were being asked to manage with less and less help. Reeves also decided to scrap the non-domiciled tax status, which had allowed some people living in the UK to pay less tax on income from abroad. This law mostly helped very wealthy individuals. Reeves said ending it would raise money and make the tax system fairer. Many supported the move. They said rich people should pay their fair share, but others were worried it would drive investors away. Another part of the October 2024 budget was an increase in stamp duty on second homes. The tax went up by 2 percentage points. Reeves said this would help raise money and stop people from buying up homes as investments, making it harder for regular families to buy. Another decision Reeves made was to freeze income tax thresholds until 2028. That meant the levels of income at which people paid different tax rates would not change, even if wages rose. Because of inflation and higher pay, more people would slowly be pushed into higher tax brackets. This kind of tax increase is often called a stealth tax because the rate stays the same, but people still end up paying more. Reeves said this was a careful way to increase tax income without raising rates. But many workers felt they were being punished for earning more while still struggling with rising living costs. Middle earners said they were being squeezed the hardest. Despite the many cuts and tax increases, Reeves made one announcement that was widely welcomed. In June 2025, she said free school meals would be expanded.
The government are looking at means testing free school meals. In fact, this government are ensuring that all children get a good start to the day with a breakfast club, helping working parents and helping all children.
Starting in September 2026, all children in households receiving universal credit would get free meals at school. The move aimed to help families facing food insecurity. Many teachers and child welfare groups praised the decision because hunger affects how children learn, and free meals would help improve attendance and focus in school. However, some people raised concerns about how the government would pay for the program. With so many other areas facing cuts, they worried the new plan might not last unless more funding was found. One major program that Reeves decided not to cut was the £13.2 billion Warm Homes Initiative. This plan aims to help people improve energy efficiency in their homes, such as by adding insulation or upgrading heating systems. It also supports the UK's goal to reduce carbon emissions. Reeves said the program would stay as it was in the next spending review. Throughout these months, Reeves made many tough choices. Some were praised, others brought heavy criticism. But Rachel Reeves often gets linked to controversial decisions. Some people think her background and personal views could be shaping the way she makes policies. Is that true? Let's look into her story. You might be surprised. What many never knew about Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves was born on February 13, 1979, in Lewisham, a busy part of southeast London. Not long after, her family moved to Beckenham in Kent. That's where she spent most of her childhood. Her home wasn't full of wealth, but it was full of ideas. Her parents talked about politics often. It was something normal in their household. They cared about what was happening in the world, and Rachel paid attention. Her younger sister Ellie also grew up with the same interest. Years later, Ellie would also become a member of Parliament. In many ways, politics ran in the family. Rachel went to a local school called Cater Park School for Girls. She was a quiet but focused student. She worked hard and enjoyed learning, especially when it came to how people lived and how governments worked. After school, she was accepted to Oxford University, where she studied philosophy, politics, and economics, often known as PPE. After finishing her degree at Oxford, Rachel went on to study economics at the London School of Economics. Once her education was complete, Rachel started her career as an economist. She got a job at the Bank of England, where she worked on research and reports about the economy. She later moved to Washington, D.C. to work at the British Embassy. Then she returned to the UK and rejoined the Bank of England in its international department. At the same time, Rachel was getting more involved in politics. When she was at university, she had joined the Fabian Society, a group that focused on progressive ideas. She joined the Labour Party while still young and started helping with campaigns. She believed in fairness, opportunity, and the power of government to help people, especially those who were struggling. She wasn't interested in shouting or slogans. She wanted to do the work, to understand the facts, and help make better decisions. But in 2015, something happened that brought an unexpected change. Rachel ran for Parliament for the first time. She stood as the Labour candidate for Bromley and Chislehurst. It was a safe Conservative area, and she didn't win. But the experience taught her a lot. More importantly, she proved she was serious. People in the Labour Party started to notice her. Losing that election didn't stop her. It just made her more determined. 5 years later, in 2010, Rachel ran again, this time in Leeds West. The seat was held by Labour and she won with a clear majority. She became an MP and moved to Westminster. In Parliament, she quickly showed she was prepared. She focused on policies and ideas that could make a real difference. And not long, people began to notice her. In 2011, Labour leader Ed Miliband made her Shadow Pensions Minister.
We're here in Labour HQ with the leader of the Labour Party and would-be Prime Minister, Ed Miliband.
She didn't stay in that role long. Later that same year, she was promoted to Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, a more senior position that focused on public spending. Then in 2013, she became the Shadow Secretary for Work and Pensions. That job was much higher profile. It brought more public attention. While in that role, Rachel made headlines. She said Labour would be tougher than the Tories on welfare. The statement caused a stir. Some people in her own party were unhappy. They thought she was being too hard, but Rachel believed that Labour had to show it could manage the country's money responsibly. After Labour lost the general election in 2015 and Jeremy Corbyn became leader, Rachel stepped back from the shadow cabinet. She didn't agree with the new direction of the party, so she focused on committee work. In 2017, she became chair of the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Committee. That gave her a chance to dig deep into the details of big economic issues, things like business policy, energy security, and job creation. When Keir Starmer became Labour leader in 2020, he asked Rachel to return to the front bench. He made her Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, a job that involved managing how the government worked behind the scenes. She was known for her strong organization and calm leadership. In 2021, Starmer promoted her again, this time to Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. That made her the party's lead voice on the economy. She replaced Annalisa Dodds and took on the job of rebuilding trust. Rachel focused on what she called a secure economy. Her goal was to show that Labour could manage the country's finances responsibly while still investing in services and communities. As the 2024 general election approached, Rachel played a key role in shaping Labour's message. She helped develop speeches, planned campaign strategy, and spoke directly to voters about what Labour would do differently. The election ended with a Labour victory. Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, and Rachel Reeves was appointed Chancellor of the Exchequer. With that appointment, she made history. She became the first woman in British history to hold the role. But for Rachel, the title wasn't the important part. She had spent years preparing for this. Now, as Chancellor, she had the chance to put all of it into action. Do you think the Supreme Court can actually strip Rachel Reeves of her fortune because of her controversial policies? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, click on the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss it.